Welcome to this presentation about sex, masculinity and God in the midst of changes. Thank you very much for the organizers of inviting me to this keynote. And my background is, my name is Daniel Dick. My background is on anthropology, social and cultural anthropology. I came to system science because of the need actually to explore the background of epistemology, of materialistic or idealistic approaches in explaining religion. And therefore I stumbled into organizing conferences and institutions basically with the topic system science and consciousness research. In here we're going to explore masculinity in its historical context, in very contemporary issues and we're facing right now, but also linking it to the perennial realms of metaphysics between masculinity, femininity, what is being one and what is the half, and how we can split the multiplicity into some practical issues. Here we go. Masculinity, sex, masculinity and God in the midst of changes. The book actually that came out, Sex, Masculinity and God, 2020, was initiated by Colin Last as a philosopher after a meeting in a bar, right after a session where he presented his PhD on the Bertalanffy Center of Systems Research, and we talked about philosophy, the world, singularity, and we came to the point in this evening that there is something really missing in philosophy, that is actually to talk about sex and relationships, because philosophy tends to think about so many topics, but distancing itself from the troubles of real life. And one troublemaker that everybody encounters that is barely touched in philosophy is sex and relationships, love, intimate relationship. Cuddle invited Kevin Arose. He's a coach, life coach for a lot of people, very popular in social media. And we started this trialogue, which have been curated by him, divided it into 10 chapters, it did it online and then transcribed it, edited, and the book came out. Then we had another 10 sessions revisiting these 10 chapters, and it's going to be edited again, and a second version is coming out soon. And I want to lead you through these basic steps of our thought process, which has been very transformative by itself. If we come to think about masculinity, we can't do it without looking into the history of feminism, which took place in the last century, especially in the last decades. To give you a small overview what feminism means, or where did it come from, is actually best described in 4 waves. The first wave in the 19th and early 20th centuries has been characterized by the women's voting rights, the movement in which women claimed to be able to vote for president, for elections, and so on. I think Switzerland was one of the last ones. We see it here in Europe. That is on 1990. that it actually happened that a woman could vote. Here you see different colors, which in different times voting rights had been implemented into the political dimension. In the 60s, we see like all this equality for women in the social and legal sphere, which issue has been expressed very much in the cultural sphere, in which women were driving, wearing dresses, having short haircuts, had the power to decide not to have children by the pill, or to position themselves in professions that before have been only positioned by men. So everything what a man was doing was kind of opened up for women. There's still differences in salaries and so on, but actually that they could enter professions started in the early 60s. From 1992, we have more emphasis on very different kinds of genders. The LGTB movement came here, and the discussion about different genders, homosexuality, gay, lesbian, trans, liquid gender, in which the representation in language or in symbols, toilets, wherever realms, should be regarded as same as important as the women movement. So we have a broader awareness about diversity, and therefore also for individuality from that time on. And from 2012, we have a massive silence-breaking upheaval of women denouncing men for their rapist activities or sexual and violent abuse, which has been most prominent being the Me Too movement, but also other performances and other social media activities have been made, like from Chile, a performance that was called El Violador Eres Tú, which means like you're the rapist. And this kind of movement gave rise to an awareness in which women have been suffering a lot about being ashamed of having experienced some kind of sexual abuse, either with a partner or not with a partner. In all of that, we have a very interesting movement in here, that there are actually the women that are going into the public sphere, that are going out, that are speaking out, and are positioning themselves in the public sphere as man has been previously done. So I want to show up a kind of paralleled topics that have been a bit of alarming, but also like moving towards a critical point in which change is happening. By the way, the illustrations have been made by Alice Herbert for the book, and on this point I want to thank her very much that she deeply felt into these issues and made these beautiful illustrations. We have some struggles that became visible in parallel pathways to the rise of feminism. On one hand, we have a decline of the crude marriage rate, which means like marriage in a very rough sense of papers, and an increase of divorce rates. which actually divorce rates doubled, marriage rates declined to 50% from the 60s, which is probably also due to the economic independence of women, since they could take positions and earn money, and also regulate the reproduction for themselves. There is sexual abuse that became more and more visible, which doesn't mean that it didn't exist before, but actually the big difference in this time is that it became more and more a topic for a public and disposal. It is researched that actually 1 of 3 women has been subjected to physical or sexual violence. And also looking more surroundings and talking to women around these topics, it is surprising, horrifying, and also it's really making one aware how much that actually is. 1 of 3 women. That means, count in here, that 1/3 of all the people in here have been subject to physical or sexual violence. We have a tendency in these last decades of more women killed as overall murder rates fall, which has been also subject to publicity. And on the other hand, we have also an increasing difference between men and women that commit suicide, which has been always higher for men, and in the last decades increased to 3 to 4 times higher for men than for women. And I want to show these earliest indicators that we have actually an overall increase of aggression and depression among men with these circumstances. And if you are in a position of being a man and don't know anymore what does that mean, I want to ask you the following questions. If you feel unsupported, having difficult times, do you feel insecure about your masculine role or the masculine identity? Or the question, how does my relation to sex and love look like? And what does it mean to be actually a man or to be masculine today? What is masculine? In having these conversations and also looking especially into psychoanalysis in philosophy, we come across Alenka Tsupanichich, which put this formula of the sexual difference in a very concise way. What splits into 2, man and woman, is the very non-existence of the one. That is, of the one which, if it existed, would be the other. This has the notion of the old Platonic view, actually, that there is a one, and actually we are not fulfilled as a oneness by ourselves, but there is another half, actually, that is the one that fulfills us being in life. We also found out that sexual difference is not a social construct, but it is this pathway of becoming one, which means it is a sexual attraction and it is a relational ontology which is not constitutive but dynamic. The different species of metaphysics which rely on such different views on how to relate masculinity, femininity to each other, and how to make a concept of living out of that, as well as for political relations, are set in 4 types, which is this oneness, monism, in which the one becomes, for example, through marriage or in the Platonic idea, androgynous being is actually to find in oneself that, in his mythological description, has been split into 2, and over lifetimes we're searching now for the other half. There's the non-dual aspect, which it claims that there is a non-existence actually of the one or the other, which you basically find, for example, in very Buddhist philosophies, but which compassion takes the place of emptiness, and emptiness is compassion, but actually it's to be none. And we have dualism, which takes the view that actually there are always 2 aspects in the world, and there has been never one. But as the sky makes perfectly sense because there's an earth, and by its existence they also create a 2, and they keep being separated in contradiction, creating the world. And then we have, since the last decades, especially through Deleuze, the view that we are embedded in a network of multiplicity related networks, which also took rise in gender theory by this individuality and the diversity, but also in different kinds of relationships, which have been open relationships or polyamorous relationships, in which there is not anymore the one woman or the one man to find for the life and stick with them, but there's the possibility to have multiple relationships either at the same time or one after the other. To find a practical sense on which toilet should I go, for example, but also to find a language to speak, but also to include a relational ontology which is based on your attraction, which is setting your pathway to become conscious about something that you have been unconscious. I like very much the division of 4 distinctions, which is actually from an indigenous North American tribe called the Obi-Wan. It's the masculine man, the feminine man, the masculine woman, the feminine woman, and the so-called double spirit, in which if you're a man, it's the biological meaning. If you're the woman, it's also the biological. But either if you're masculine or feminine, it relates also to a certain quality, and you would be attracted to the other quality, which means it doesn't matter if the biological sex is a man or a woman, but you would be attracted as a masculine to a feminine, or as a masculine to or as a feminine to a masculine. And the double spirit takes it all. He cracked the jackpot. And from these very questions that we're facing, actually, we see that we are in a time in which multiplicity has taken like the predominant lead role, but that this led to a certain uncertainty of identification, which usually is set up by emotional instability, that is mirrored actually by the numbers and statistics, which can lead to the assumption that there's a lot of aggression and depression out of this insecurity, in which masculinity or something to be as a man has lost its orientation, because we're facing a gap between a patriarchal tradition in which man had a unique role and position in society, and on the other hand, there has been an emancipation of women in these public spheres. And I think we're facing a loss of a masculine identity, as it has been, because on one hand there are tendencies of movements that go back to old patriarchal traditions, and other movements that are trying to find a new way to set up masculinity which goes along with the feminism and the feminist movement. But what is visible to see, that all these indicators are showing that we are actually on a very tipping point on what that role model for masculinity could be. We see uncertainty, we see chaotic structures in man and masculinity, instability, a real gap between old and possibly new patterns, and quite a loss of identity structures. And the question is, what kind of new equilibrium will be stable enough to uphold a creative force in which man and woman, masculine and feminine, or maybe some kind of androgynous being, might be the answer to reaching out a healthy society. I want to dedicate this to the end, actually, to all these women that I've encountered, that I've never seen, that maybe none of you have listened to. To all women that their pain lasts in silence. To all women that their crying was never heard. To all women that give away their bodies. To all women that keep giving birth to everyone. To all women that bow down when fight is inside. To all women that stand firm when soldiers pass. To all women that leave courage but stand for peace. To all women that don't speak out when they see their daughters in the same situation as they have been suffering. To all women that fear shame for the pain instead of honor for justice. To all women that choose grace instead of truth. To all women that keep silence to protect the peace. I want to end this with some food for discussion. And as well as in the book, as well as this presentation, it is not to find a single solution, but to find a way to communicate. The questions is what is masculinity today? What is masculine today? And the second question is, how can we evolve from the lack of being one and its sexual difference? Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Dick, and I hope you enjoy this presentation, and I hope I got you into some reflections. Thank you.